I'm talking to Peter Sullivan about the early years in Melbourne, the mid-70s to the late 70s of the Poets Union. Peter was lucky enough to be embroiled in the radical poets in those days. And Peter, you told me that you actually began by a connection to theatre, Barry Dickens, people like that.
Yeah. Well, basically, I met Barry in Carlton, really. Barry was living at a place called the Manse in Princes Street with an artist called John Bell, who actually was quite a famous artist, is quite fairly well known.
And became a film director.
No, so not the same guy.
Not the same guy.
No, Shakespeare.
Yes, that's
Bell Shakespeare.
That's
different John Bell.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
we can cut this.
That's another story. So I went round to the Manse one day, and as lots of people did in those days, just sort of dropping in and out. And Barry said to me, "Oh, do you like painting pictures?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, well, let's paint one on the back wall." So I think I painted the sun, and he painted a mother and child sort of near the sun. It was a lot of fun.
No, they're not in the camera.
Right.
So you met Barry Dickens and the Manse.
Yeah.
Now this, I imagine, is about 75, 76.
Yeah, maybe a bit earlier than that.
Earlier than that?
Yeah, maybe sort of 73, 74.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, back then. Yeah, well, Barry used to drag me along to readings at 87A in Footscray, the Footscray Community Arts Centre.
That Robert Hughes was running.
Robert Hughes ran. He was a poet as well. Mm-hmm. And I met people there. I met Alex Salinich, Hi-O, Jazz Duke, quite a few people. And I'd never really met.
Yeah.
Really, that was probably the biggest concentration. It would have been 76.
Yeah.
And I was invited to do some lighting at the Pram Factory back theatre by Barry Dickens. And he was doing a play with 4 other playwrights. And among the other playwrights was Eric Beach did a short play, Stephen Master, Gig Ryan, and somebody else, can't remember who they all were.
Yeah, but Eric did a short play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he also did some odd bits of concrete poems.
Later on, which I didn't know about until we found it in the book.
That side of Eric I didn't know either.
Yeah, not something he did a lot of.
Okay, but
so I met Eric, and Eric said, "Oh, why don't you come to a barbecue? There's a whole lot of poets getting together down at Rosemary Nisson's place down in Beaumaris." So at that stage I was working as a carpenter, and I had this van, which was like a closed furniture van back kind of thing. And a whole lot of people decided they needed a lift, which included Hi-O and Yelchi and Eric, and they all hopped in the back of the van. And I remember Yelchi saying that it was like they were gorillas or something. They were sort of in the back of this van.
An art attack.
An art attack, yeah. So we went down and had a nice time at the barbecue, and there was a bit of reading going on. I think Billy Marshall was down there, Neil Murray, a few other people. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of energy around. I think all those people had just kind of gotten together, really, around that time, and really decided to do something. So the Poets Union kind of came out of that. And there was a book that came out called Chuk Chuk, which was a self-published, the collective kind of publishing thing.
Yep.
Had been going, so they put stuff together in that. There was a whole kind of collective of people. I think Kathy Messenger was part of that. I think it was a collective, so it wasn't anyone in particular.
Because
I think it really was a group effort.
Yeah.
They collected quite a few people's work.
Yeah.
put it together. And there was a lot of excitement around that too. And they were cooking up meals for heaps of people while they were collating it. And, you know, that kind of energy.
Yeah. How did you come to do your first readings?
The first time I remember reading was, basically I read at the Albion Hotel at readings that Jeffrey Eggleston was running, and then Jeffrey asked me if I wanted to be in the National Poetry Festival, which was in at Montsalvat.
The Montsalvat Festival went quite a number of
Well,
years.
yeah, Jeffrey did quite a lot of that.
Yeah, yes.
That work, keeping that going. Yeah. There was an American poet there, Gary Snyder.
Ah, the Snyder visit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gary Snyder, and there was a Japanese poet whose name I can't remember.
No, I can't.
But he was hilarious. He
Yes.
was fantastic.
I can almost picture the Japanese guy, but I'm sure I can find out who that was.
He said he had lines like, you know, Starsky and Hutch is on the television, and all is well with the world. And at the same time, I'd been publishing poems in 9 to 5. So I had those poems, so I basically read those poems at Montsalvat.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Pete, I've got there's a great photo of you with 9 to 5 birthday candles.
Yeah.
Who was at that afternoon tea?
Pio was there, Yoshi was there, Celia, Pio's sister, was there with her friend, whose name I can't remember, and Lynn Boughton. And then the poets themselves often just chipped in on jobs, so I think we're the sort of editorial kind of group back then. So Pio would get the magazine printed and it'd be in boxes of unfolded, unstapled print-offs of pages, and we'd put all the pages together in the right order and put the covers on and spend a whole night doing that.
Oh, cool.
To constant reruns of the Blues Brothers.
Oh, that's
They were
great.
pretty great nights, really. Lots of fun, really. It wasn't like work at all, really. Not work, which is interesting for a poetry book about work. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and all of the covers were all handmade, really. They generally, well, some of them were printed, but usually all the artwork was done by someone around. Pi did a lot of covers. I did a few. Other people did other photos for covers. You know, it was a kind of a movable feast.
Yeah.
As far as that went.
That's
They were
great.
pretty great nights, really. Lots of fun, really. It wasn't like work at all. Really. Hilarious.
Oh, that sounds fun, yeah.
It was fun, yeah.
Now, Peter, you did some concrete poetry yourself?
Yeah.
And did those ones that we've got, did you exhibit them or did they go in a book?
Yeah, they were in an exhibition. It was some years later, after I sort of came back to Melbourne, but they were Pete Spence sort of helped me put together that exhibition, and I also put together an exhibition of Pete Spence's work and a whole collective of other people at the National Theatre in those days. So in the windows of the National Theatre for the St Kilda Festival. I curated that particular show. So yeah, there was another point of energy, I suppose. Yeah, early 90s, really.
Yes,
then.
by that stage.
By that stage.
But you did tell me before that you can remember your first poem that was in 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And it was the second edition, that you thought you'd be in the first.
Yeah.
Tell me the story why it wasn't in the first and why it was in the second edition.
Oh, well, I was working at a place called Western Youth Welfare in those days as a youth worker, And I met a guy called Barry McDonald, who turns out is a poet. He's still a poet. And he said, oh, why don't you put something in for 9 to 5? We're doing stuff about work, because I think he was a member of the collective at that stage. And so I gave him a couple of poems that I'd written, and but I didn't realise that he wasn't the editor. The editor was actually Pi-O. And so they didn't get published, and I didn't sort of think about it. And then Barry said, I think you need to talk to Pi. And I said, oh, okay. So at some stage I met Pi again, and said, oh, what's happened with the poems? And he said, oh, look, you just needed to talk to me about it. Then I know who you are, and I can say something about you and introduce you and all that. So he said, by the way, they were great poems. And he published them with I think there was a photograph next to the poem of a gorilla throwing something. And I'd written a poem about a stint that I did in the Regional Employment Development Scheme under Gough Whitlam. There was a lot of us who were unemployed in those days. Yeah. And so I got a job at the zoo and on a jackhammer. It's a true story. So the poem went, once I worked on a jackhammer outside the monkey cage at the zoo. When I finished, my arms reached almost to my feet, and the pay was peanuts.
At the time of the Poets Union forming, do you think it was a buzz of excitement amongst the poets, a sense of purpose, direction?
There really was, and a lot of it was, and I think Pi summed up a lot of it with another collection of poems about performance poetry, because really a lot of those people were very much into working with the voice, working with the poem as a performance piece rather than so much off the page. I mean, the poems still read really well off the page, but the performances were something else. So people like Pi were really consummate performers, really.
Quite right, yeah. You had a bit more access to the audience when you put the book down and you just performed it.
Yeah, and lots of other things spun off from that. Radio, we were on radio with PBS or
3CR.
3CR.
So how do you find now, looking back on those 40 years ago, 45, 50 years ago, are you glad you dabbled, put your hand up into poetry?
Yeah, of course. Of course, I mean, I think it showed me that literature, writing was something that could be just an ordinary part of your life, and about ordinary life. People weren't espousing sort of lofty kind of ideals. They were talking about gritty, real subject. Yeah.
Well, Peter, thanks for that little chat, mate.
That's all right.
We could talk all day on this topic.
Yeah, of course we could. Mazel tov.